The tomatoes have gone quiet, the pepper plants are tired, the leaves curling at the edges, and that patch by the fence where your early crops used to stand is just sitting there empty, doing nothing. It looks like the season is winding down. It isn't. Not even close. These 10 vegetables planted this week will still be filling your basket long after everything else has finished. Hit that subscribe button, because this channel is built on exactly this kind of low-cost, high-reward gardening, and let's get into it. 1. Kale. Kale is the plant that makes you look like a gardening genius, even when you put it in almost by mistake. I once tucked a short row into a gap in the bed just to use the space, and by the time the cool weeks arrived, it had quietly become the most useful thing growing in the whole compound. Here's why the timing works. Once the weather cools, the leaves start converting their stored starches into sugar. That sugar acts like a natural antifreeze, protecting the plant's cells from cold damage. In practical terms, that means leaves that taste tough and slightly bitter now will turn genuinely sweet and tender a few weeks later. Sow the seeds shallow, about 1 centimeter deep, and thin the seedlings out once they're established, leaving roughly 15 to 30 centimeters between plants. Harvesting by pulling the older outer leaves from the base and leaving the small center leaves untouched, the plant will keep pushing new growth from that center for weeks. One well-kept row can carry a household's greens for a long stretch without a single replant. Go for harder varieties if you can find them, or whatever local kale/ogu type green is common in your market. The principle is the same. It gets better, not worse, as it gets cooler. 2. Spinach/leafy greens that hate heat. Something most people don't realize. Spinach seed can sense when it's too hot to bother growing. Above a certain soil temperature, the seed simply refuses to sprout. You water it faithfully, nothing comes up, and you end up blaming the seed seller. The trick is a cold trick. Wrap the seeds in a damp cloth, seal them in a bag, and leave them in the fridge for 2 days before planting. That short cold spell resets the seed, and germination improves dramatically, even if the soil outside is still warm. Sow about 1 centimeter deep, in rows roughly 20 to 30 centimeters apart, and thin seedlings so they have 2 to 5 centimeters of breathing room. Keep the soil consistently damp while the seedlings establish the roots are shallow and dry out fast. As the weather cools further, the leaves concentrate their sugars and taste noticeably sweeter than anything grown in full heat. 3. Carrots. A neighbor of mine pulls his carrots once the weather turns properly cool and hands me one straight out of the soil, unwashed. It's sweet enough to eat like fruit. That's not exaggeration, it's chemistry. As the soil cools, the root converts its stored starch into sugar as a kind of self-protection, and the flavor concentrates in a way a hot season carrot simply can't match. The one rule that can't be broken: sow the seed directly where it will grow. Never transplant carrot seedlings. Disturbing that young taproot is what causes forked, twisted roots later. Sow is barely covered, about 0.5 centimeter deep, into loose, stone-free soil that's been worked at least 20 centimeters deep. Compacted or rocky soil is the other cause of forked roots. The root simply can't push through and splits instead. Keep the surface moist until germination, then thin to about 5 centimeters apart once the seedlings have a few true leaves. Weed by hand, and carefully young carrots uproot easily if you yank nearby weeds without care. 4. Radishes, the fast ones and the storage ones. Most people only know radish as the quick filler crop, squeezed in between the real vegetables. That's only half the story. There are fast varieties that go from seed to table in as little as 3 weeks, and there are slower, larger storage varieties most gardeners never try. The fast types double as a useful trick. Sow them in the same row as slow germinating seeds like carrots. They come up quickly, mark exactly where the row is, and help break up the soil crust for the slower seeds coming up underneath. One warning: once temperatures climb too high, radish roots turn woody, spongy, and unpleasantly sharp. So it's worth waiting until the worst heat has broken before sowing. Sow about 1 centimeter deep and thin to roughly 2.5 centimeters apart. For a real change, look for a long white storage-type radish. It grows deep, dense roots that actually improve in flavor after the weather turns cold, and it stores for months in a cool, dark spot, a genuinely useful pantry vegetable most people are sleeping on. Quick one before we continue. If this kind of practical, zero-cost gardening is useful to you, tap subscribe. My partner still doesn't believe we'll hit 10,000 subscribers on this channel, and honestly, I'd love to prove them wrong with your help. Alright, back to the list. 5. Beetroot. Beetroot might be the single most underrated crop on this list, because most people plant it for the root and completely forget they're also growing a leafy green at the same time. The young tops are edible from the moment you thin the seedlings, and they taste like a milder version of any leafy green you already cook with. One planting, two vegetables, the bed does double duty. Here's a detail most sellers won't tell you. What looks like a single beet seed is actually a small cluster of 2 to 4 seeds fused together. If you plant them as they are, all of them sprout in the same spot and fight each other for space. Soak the seed clusters in water for a full day. Before sowing, it softens the outer coat and noticeably improves how evenly they come up. Sow just under a centimeter deep and thin to about 8 to 10 centimeters apart once established. Harvest the roots at around the size of a golf ball for the best flavor and texture. Leave them too long and the texture turns woody and the sweetness fades. 6. Lettuce. Lettuce grown in full heat is always racing against the clock. It bolts, turns bitter, and the window between perfect and ruined is measured in days. Cooler weather flips that completely. Shorter, cooler days push the plant towards sweetness instead of racing to flower, which makes a cool season lettuce far more forgiving to grow and far better to eat. The catch is getting it started. Because lettuce seed shares spinach's problem above a certain heat, it simply won't germinate reliably outdoors. The safer route is to start the seed indoors or in a shaded spot where it stays cooler, then move the seedlings out once they're sturdy. A small tray on a counter with a bit of airflow works perfectly well. Transplant shallow, about half a centimeter deep, spacing plants 5 to 10 centimeters apart. Harvest in the cooler part of the day, the leaves hold more water then, and the crunch is noticeably better than an afternoon pick. 7. Turnips. Nobody gives turnips the credit they deserve. They're one of the fastest root crops you can grow. The greens are ready in about a month, the roots not long after, and stored properly in a cool, dark spot, they'll keep for months. One planting can genuinely carry you well into the next season. The flavor transformation is worth understanding. A turnip pulled while it's still hot outside has a sharp, almost peppery bite that puts a lot of people off the vegetable for life. The same root pulled, once the weather has properly cooled, is noticeably milder and sweeter. The same starch to sugar conversion that improves kale and carrots does the same thing here. Sow shallow, about a centimeter deep, and thin to 5 to 8 centimeters apart. Don't waste the thinnings. The baby greens are perfectly good added straight into any pot. At harvest, cut the leafy tops off completely before storing. Left attached, they keep pulling moisture out of the root, and it shrivels within days. There's a specific kind of satisfaction in pulling a tight, heavy cabbage that you planted when everything else was still struggling in the heat. A cabbage grown through hot weather fights bolting and pest pressure the entire way. A cabbage that forms its head slowly as the weather cools produces something denser, crisper, and far better at storing. Give the plants real room, 30 to 60 centimeters between plants, depending on variety, similar spacing between rows. Crowding is the single biggest reason cabbage heads come out small and loose. Consistent watering matters more here than almost anywhere else in the garden. A dry spell followed by heavy rain causes the head to split, because the inner leaves swell faster than the outer ones can stretch to hold them. Harvest once the head feels firm and solid when you press it, not soft or springy. Leave it too long, and splitting becomes a matter of time, not luck. 9. Garden peas. Planting peas outside the usual season feels wrong to a lot of gardeners, but a later planting that matures into cooler weather often outperforms the standard season crop on flavor alone, because the plant fills its pods while things are cooling, rather than racing against heat. What's worth knowing about peas? Their roots form a partnership with bacteria in the soil that pull nitrogen straight out of the air and fix it into the ground. Peas essentially feed themselves and feed the soil for whatever you plant after them. That also means extra fertilizer is a mistake here. It pushes the plant into producing more leaf and vine at the expense of flowers and pods. Sow about 2 to 4 centimeters deep, roughly 2 to 4 centimeters apart, and get a simple trellis or stake structure up before or right at sowing, trying to train sprawling vines onto a support afterwards that damages more stems than it saves. Harvest daily once the pods start filling. The sugar inside a freshly picked pea starts turning to starch within hours, so a same-day pick is the difference between memorable and merely fine. 10. Potatoes. Potatoes planted for a cool season harvest are simply better than the same crop dug in full heat. The skin sets firmer in cool soil, they store noticeably longer, and you're filling the pantry at exactly the point in the year when it matters most. The step that makes the real difference is called chitting. Set the seed potatoes in a bright, cool spot for 2 to 3 weeks before planting, so the eyes sprout short, sturdy green shoots first. A chitted potato goes into the ground already growing, instead of sitting idle in warm soil. If your seed pieces are large, cut them down and let the cut sides dry and callus for a couple of days before planting. Plant into a trench with about 5 centimeters of soil over the top. Then mulch heavily with straw or dry grass to keep the soil cool and hold moisture. Don't rush the harvest and wait until most of the top foliage has yellowed and died back naturally. Pulling early means small tubers with skin so thin it damages if you look at it wrong. After digging, let them dry and cure in a shaded, airy spot for about 2 weeks before storing it. Firm the skin and extend how long they'll keep. That's the point of this whole list. This isn't the end of the growing year, it's a handover. As the heat grows, the cooler weeks are about to sweeten. All 10 of these can go in the ground this week. If even one of these is new to you, tell me which one in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the moment. My partner is convinced we won't hit 10,000 before the year is out. Let's prove them wrong together. See you in the next video.